Adolf Hitler, now Germany's Führer, has pledged to restore prosperity and happiness to the German people. But at the same time, he stands on the verge of unleashing unimaginable destruction across the world. Years of brutal warfare, along with a plan to wipe out the Jews and anyone else he considers a threat to mankind. Our story, however, begins with an act of deception, before the war has even begun. It follows British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain as he travels to Germany for a face-to-face meeting with Hitler. By this point, Hitler has already absorbed Austria, and Czechoslovakia appears to be the next nation in his sights. Britain, along with much of the rest of the world, is left wondering what this unusual man with the distinctive mustache is truly planning. During their meeting, the two leaders sign a declaration expressing their desire to resolve future disputes peacefully. Afterward, Chamberlain writes to his sister, "In spite of the hardness and ruthlessness I thought I saw in his face, I got the impression that here was a man who could be relied upon when some in the crowd have already read Hitler's own book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle in English, and know all about his obsession with what he calls a Jewish plot to dominate the world, along with his sweeping ambitions for Germany." They've come across passages like this one: all great cultures of the past perished only because the originally creative race died out from blood poisoning. Still, Chamberlain assures those around him that Hitler isn't unhinged, just an animated character who in person would hardly stand out in a crowd. He insists Hitler has no real appetite for a full-blown war. Day 1, September 4, 1939. Just over a year later at 2 a.m., soldiers of the German Army's 1st Mounted Regiment hear a bugle sound out along the Polish border. A voice cries out, "Muzzle caps off." Load. Roughly 1.5 million German troops face off against 1.2 million Polish soldiers along the Western Front. The Germans pour into Poland like a plague. Before long, Polish cavalry horses are collapsing to the ground, and an hour later the German advance continues past riderless horses, fleeing through drifting smoke. In the towns, civilians hear bombers overhead, sirens wail, children and their parents run through the streets, some still in their pajamas, as the German Luftwaffe opens fire without hesitation on unarmed people below. The head of Britain's military mission in Poland, General Adrian Carleton, writes home, "I am seeing the very face of war change. Its glory shorn, no longer the soldiers setting forth into battle, but the women and children being buried under it. A new kind of war, a war of machines, has arrived." Day 3 newspaper vendors across Britain shout from their corners, "Read all about it. Hitler invades Poland." The Evening Standard runs the bold headline, "I will give Poland a lesson. Hitler." Both Britain and France respond by declaring war on Germany. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Americans tune into their radios and quietly breathe a sigh of relief. There's no chance, they figure, of getting dragged into another European war. Day 4 Nazi Party official Fritz Mühlebach writes in a letter, "I regard Britain and France's interference as nothing but a formality." As soon as they realize the utter hopelessness of Polish resistance and the vast superiority of German arms, they will begin to see that we are always in the right and it is pointless to meddle. Britain and France are betting that simply entering the war will be enough to make Hitler back down, and they're still holding out hope that the German people themselves will rise up and remove their dictator. Day 8 in Warsaw, residents huddle around their radios as bombs rain down outside. Chopin's military polonaise plays faintly beneath the roar of machine guns. The Germans will drop 30,000 bombs a day, storming the city and eventually killing 18,000 civilians there, while taking 140,000 more prisoner in a single day. Hitler already has plans for many of them. Plans that will play out at his concentration camps, sites where, as we'll see, human cruelty reaches its absolute limit. Day 17 the Poles are counting on French reinforcements to arrive, but they never do. Instead, Joseph Stalin's army crosses the border and launches its own brutal invasion from the east. Stalin wants his share of the spoils, and for the time being, he and Hitler have an agreement. Day 36 Hitler strolls proudly through the wreckage of Warsaw, addressing a crowd of foreign correspondents. "Gentlemen," he tells them, "you have seen for yourselves what criminal folly it is to try and defend this city." Then comes a chilling warning. "I only wish that certain statesmen in other countries who seem to want to turn all Europe into a second Warsaw could have the opportunity to see, as you have, the real meaning of war." The message is unmistakable. Cross him, and your cities will meet the same fate. The German war machine is fearsome, and the rest of the world is starting to take notice. U.S. Ambassador Joseph Kennedy asks bluntly, "Where on earth can the Allies fight the Germans and beat them?" It's not a question anyone wants to hear, but it's a fair one. Day 104 Hitler is furious, stamping his feet and shouting at his generals, humiliated more than anything. His navy, the Kriegsmarine, has just suffered its first real defeat at the Battle of the River Plate. Outmatched by the British fleet. Maybe the Germans aren't as unbeatable as they seem. Day 252 Having already conquered Denmark and Norway, Hitler now sets his sights on Belgium, confident his Blitzkrieg tactics will make quick work of it. Across the Channel, Britain has a new prime minister, a stubborn, war-hardened figure with a deep attachment to empire. Winston Churchill. He'll soon deliver one of his stirring radio addresses, urging the British people to arm yourselves, and be ye men of valor, and be in readiness for the conflict. But Churchill's words alone can't hide the fact that Germany's military is far stronger. Something Hitler knows all too well. Day 270 Belgium now falls under Nazi occupation. German troops once again gun down unarmed civilians without mercy. While 1.5 million Belgians manage to escape, thousands more are killed. Homes burn as tanks flatten everything in their path. Day 279 A pivotal moment. Hitler addresses his troops, soldiers of the Western Front. Dunkirk has fallen. Soldiers. My confidence in you knows no bounds. You have not disappointed me. 40,000 French and English troops are all that remains of the formerly great armies. Immeasurable quantities of material have been captured. The greatest battle in the history of the world has come to an end. He's now claimed victory in the Battle of France, sending the British fleeing back across the Channel, grateful at least that things weren't worse. The evacuation was dangerous, but far from a total catastrophe. Germany's military might is proving unstoppable. Day 299 Hitler celebrates once more. French bodies lie scattered across the countryside, many unrecognizable. Backed by 4.2 million army soldiers, a million Luftwaffe personnel, 180,000 in the Kriegsmarine, and 100,000 Waffen-SS troops, Hitler has conquered France, which now falls into occupation and collaboration under the Vichy regime. Some 85,310 French soldiers have died defending their country, and Britain, too, has taken heavy losses, thousands of men, hundreds of ships, and nearly 1,000 aircraft. It's worth remembering that Hitler has always harbored a strange fondness for Britain. He once remarked, "The English nation will have to be considered the most valuable ally in the world," convinced that any hatred toward him in the UK stems from an American and Jewish conspiracy. Even so, he now understands he'll have to bring this small island nation to its knees. Day 314 at home, Hitler sits quietly, replaying a speech Churchill delivered not long ago. "We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Hitler smiles, glancing down at his Alsatian, and says, "They did fight us in France, didn't they? But they lost, didn't they, my little German dumpling?" Churchill, meanwhile, knows exactly what's coming. As he made clear in another address, Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age. Few give Britain much of a chance. Even without a full land invasion, Hitler expects his air raids to bring the country to its knees and force a peace deal, freeing him up to turn his attention elsewhere, namely, toward Stalin's Soviet Union. Pact or no pact, Day 339 the Battle of Britain begins. The RAF is stretched thin, no doubt about it. German intelligence has badly underestimated British strength, while the British, in turn, overestimate the size of the German threat. Hundreds of bombers sweep over English cities, and many civilians lose their lives, but the population refuses to break. Germany then makes one of several critical blunders during the campaign, shifting its bombing focus away from airfields and onto cities instead. It's a decision that quietly relieves Churchill, who all but thanks Hitler for it. The cities, he believes, can endure, and he's right. Day 427 crowds fill the streets of Britain in celebration, belting out the popular wartime tune mocking Hitler's inner circle. Germany has made too many costly missteps, but unbeknownst to the celebrating public, Hitler has already shifted his focus away from Britain, planning to deal with it later. His next target is the Soviet Union, driven by both economic motives and deep ideological hatred. Where his feelings toward Britain are complicated, his contempt for the USSR is absolute. He despises communism and views the Soviet population, in his twisted worldview, as being made up of Jews and Slavs. By now, Germany and Britain combined have lost more than 3,000 aircraft and 4,000 personnel, and 43,000 British civilians have died over the 8-month campaign. Yet since almost no one expected Britain to survive, the rest of the world takes new confidence from its endurance. In America, where Britain's collapse once seemed inevitable, commentators now say the Battle of Britain will go down in history as a battle as important as Waterloo or Gettysburg. One battle has been won, but the war is only getting started. Day 661, it's 3:15 in Berlin, and Hitler sits in his apartment at the Reich Chancellery on Wilhelmstrasse 77. His new Alsatian puppy, Blondie, curled beside him. Stroking the dog's head, he murmurs, "They won't know what has hit them, will they, my little dumpling?" 3.8 million men, thousands and thousands of aircraft, tanks, artillery, are coming to squash those Slavic fools. He adds, "Stalin's not so tough. Is he, dumpling? Let's see if he really is the man of steel." Stalin may not be tough, but his people certainly are. Millions will die in what becomes the bloodiest conflict in human history. They'll starve, freeze, and more than 300,000 will be executed by their own army for desertion or other offenses. Roughly 5 million Soviet soldiers will be captured, many tortured and killed. Yet these people prove as unyielding as the frozen Russian ground itself. They will endure, though Hitler has no idea of this as he whispers his plans to his dog. That night he lies awake going over every detail of the coming invasion, Operation Barbarossa. Just after 3:15, near the Bug River Bridge on the German-Soviet border, a German soldier calls out to troops on the Russian side, luring them over under the pretense of discussing important matters. The moment they cross, they're gunned down. In the chaos, German engineers detonate the bridge. The soldiers convince themselves it's kill or be enslaved by what they see as an inferior race. What Hitler fails to grasp is just how resilient these people truly are, many having already survived Stalin's brutal forced industrialization, which killed 6 million of their own not long before. They know suffering intimately. Hitler is banking on mass desertions and low morale to secure victory, but Stalin will keep sending troops, young and old, many walking straight into gunfire rather than facing execution by their own commanders for refusing Day 829 Japanese aircraft strike the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, catching America completely off guard. It's a catastrophic blow for the U.S. and, from Japan's perspective, a stunning success. A clear message to America about the cost of backing the Allies and interfering with Japanese ambitions in Southeast Asia. Hitler only learns of the attack after the fact, since Japan never consulted him. Thrilled by the news, he tells one of his commanders, "We can't lose the war at all. We now have an ally which has never been conquered in 3,000 years." Still, he hasn't abandoned his long-term goal of eventually confronting what he calls the Yellow Race. For now, though, he's satisfied, believing Britain will be too occupied defending its Asian territories from Japan, and that the U.S. will be too preoccupied with the Pacific to interfere in Europe. That, he thinks, leaves him free to focus on dominating Eastern Europe. Day 833, the United States declares war on Germany and Italy, having already declared war on Japan. President Roosevelt answers Churchill's earlier rhetoric with his own. The forces endeavoring to enslave the entire world now are moving toward this hemisphere. Rapid and united effort by all of the peoples of the world who are determined to remain free will ensure a world victory of the forces of justice and of righteousness over the forces of savagery and of barbarism. Hitler dismisses America as a mongrel nation incapable of real fighting, holding little respect for the young country. He's about to find out just how wrong he is. Day 1010, looking for proof of American military strength? Look no further than the U.S. victory over Japan at the Battle of Midway, which unfolds on this day. Japan suffers a devastating loss, 3,057 dead compared to just 307 Americans, though not quite a fatal blow. Day 1100, German soldier Hans-Jürgen Hartmann writes that no matter how many Russians they kill, more keep coming. He and his fellow soldiers are starving and freezing, ordered to spare no one. In his diary he writes, "How brutal this war is becoming. It is now a total war, a war against women, children, and old people. And that is the greatest horror." Yet, like the rest of the troops, he's been fed the same propaganda over and over, that Russia, a land of cruelty, deserves to be met with cruelty. Before long, Hitler will realize outright victory is out of reach. But he'll keep fighting anyway, determined to extract whatever concessions he can from any eventual settlement. Day 1206, the battles of Stalingrad and Leningrad, already raging for some time, are among the most horrific of the entire war. Millions will die, most of them Soviet, though German losses are staggering too. War is always brutal, but these battles push past any ordinary definition of the word. Both sides commit atrocities on a massive scale, and Stalin capitalizes on the bloodshed, rallying his people through what he calls the Great Patriotic War. As the fighting drags on, some German soldiers begin to lose faith in victory. Panzer officer Wolfgang Paul writes, "We have blundered, mistakenly, into an alien landscape with which we can never be properly acquainted. Everything is cold, hostile, and working against us." Another soldier predicts the Russians will fight to the last man over every inch of ground, adding, "We are entering a war of attrition, and I only hope in the long run that Germany will win it." Day 1250, in Leningrad, starvation grips the population. Bread rations shrink to just 4.5 ounces a day. Still, life limps on. Scientist Axel Reichert manages to complete a major study, the fauna of the Soviet Union, only to be found dead in his chair days later. The theaters keep staging plays, though half-starved actors sometimes collapse mid-performance. A woman named Elena writes in her diary, "People are so weak with hunger that they are completely indifferent to death. They perish as if they are falling asleep. Those half-dead people who are still around do not even pay attention to them." Perhaps most disturbing of all is the emergence of cannibalism among the starving. A militia report from the winter of 1942 records one harrowing account. A woman, driven to desperation, admits to cutting flesh from her unconscious husband's leg to feed herself and her children. She is executed for it. Britain and America remain largely unaware of the true scale of suffering, simply hoping the Russians can hold their ground, regardless of the cost. Lieutenant von Hale writes home, "Human life is cheap, cheaper than the shovels we use to clear the roads of snow. The state we have reached will seem quite unbelievable to you back home. We do not kill humans, but the enemy, who are rendered impersonal, animals at best. They behave the same towards us. The Eastern Front will remain the war's deadliest theater for years to come, but Russia will not break. Day 1400 Hitler reviews reports on the death camps, where roughly 6 million Jews, along with countless others from various ethnic groups, are being murdered, starved, beaten, or subjected to horrifying medical experiments. The cruelty on display defies comprehension. Meanwhile, the news from the front is turning increasingly grim for Hitler. Day 1524 Hitler issues new orders: no more reinforcements to the Eastern Front. Instead, he insists, the fight against the Anglo-American forces must take priority in Italy and France. By now, the battle for Leningrad is effectively lost, though German troops keep fighting regardless. Many of Hitler's top generals disagree with his strategy. One of them, Rolf Helmut Schroeder, argues that if commanders were simply given the freedom to make their own decisions, they might actually stand a chance. But Hitler's word remains final. Clinging to delusion, he believes his propaganda posters proclaiming Hitler the Liberator across Ukraine will somehow prove true. He's badly mistaken. Day 1532 Hitler now finds himself cornered. Italy has just surrendered, and a major Soviet offensive appears imminent. He hopes that repelling an Allied invasion of France might free up troops to reinforce the Eastern Front. Among the Allies, debate rages over how best to retake France. Churchill objects to American plans to bomb French railway lines, warning of heavy civilian casualties, while the Americans argue the losses are an unavoidable cost of victory. Ultimately, roughly 70,000 French civilians will die in these Allied air raids. With many in France having supported the collaborationist Vichy regime, some Allied commanders show little hesitation about the toll. Day 1174 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Hitler's so-called Atlantic Wall in Normandy, what history remembers as D-Day. Survivors will later describe it as walking straight into the jaws of death. Some 156,000 Allied soldiers, mostly American, British, and Canadian, hit the beaches, some charging forward, others frozen with fear. One American private later recalls, "There were men crying with fear, men defecating themselves. I lay there with some others, too petrified to move." He's struck in the arm and initially assumes it's a bullet, only to realize it's a severed hand from someone nearby. Back home, Americans huddle around their radios for updates, while in Britain, industrial strikes are paused so workers can follow the news and donate blood. One German soldier writes that morning, "The whistling of shells and shattering explosions around us created the worst kind of music. Only a tiny, tiny handful of our company remains." By nightfall, British forces have repelled Germany's 21st Panzer Division, and American troops have pushed up to 3 miles inland. The invasion claims 2,501 American lives, 1,449 British, 391 Canadian, and 73 from other Allied nations, alongside thousands of German soldiers and even more French civilians. Day 1600 Hitler now stands on the edge of total defeat, his forces retreating across the Western Front and collapsing in Russia. German cities lie in ruins from Allied bombing, and morale at home has cratered. Surrender would be the logical move, but Hitler refuses, determined to spill as much blood as possible before the end, even if it means drafting children into the fight. Day 1784, with the war clearly unwinnable, a group of Nazi generals attempts to assassinate Hitler with a bomb on this day. The plot fails. Hitler survives, injured but very much alive, and soon back to barking orders. Gripped by paranoia, he orders a sweeping investigation, and thousands suspected of disloyalty are arrested. 4,980 of them are executed. One condemned man defiantly shouts before his execution, "The whole world will vilify us now, but I am still totally convinced that we did the right thing." Hitler is the archenemy not only of Germany, but of the world. Day 2029 Allied forces push into Germany, with the Soviet Red Army reaching it first from the east, showing little mercy to German civilians after years of witnessing unspeakable atrocities. One terrified woman, starving, writes simply, "We are afraid." From the west, British and American troops advanced toward Berlin as well. A Soviet soldier notes in his diary, "At first the fascists fought back fiercely, but they could not endure this hell. Everything is bound to finish soon." He's largely correct. Meanwhile, the Germans scramble to destroy evidence of the horrors committed in their camps, even as top Nazi officials and scientists quietly begin fleeing. Some of whom, astonishingly, will later be recruited by American intelligence for their usefulness in science or the emerging Cold War against the Soviets. Day 2042 American troops liberate the Ohrdruf concentration camp and are horrified by what they find. Piles of corpses and survivors who've endured almost unimaginable suffering. As more camps are liberated, the full scope of Nazi atrocities begins to come into focus. The Soviets have already witnessed similar horrors at Auschwitz, discovering mountains of shoes and bodies dumped in mass graves. Around this time, holed up in his Berlin bunker, Hitler learns that some of his orders have gone unheeded and suffers a complete breakdown. Day 2044 Stalin is determined to reach Berlin first, not just out of pride, but because he knows the US and Britain are nearing completion of an atomic bomb. He wants to secure German scientists for himself before anyone else can. Day 2063 Soviet generals Zhukov and Konev position their forces around Berlin, facing fierce resistance from defenders who are often little more than boys, their helmets swallowing their young faces. Wounded, they cry out in high-pitched screams. Many fight so desperately because they know exactly what fate awaits them if captured by the Red Army: a brutal end, especially for the women left behind in the city. Day 2066 from his bunker, Hitler listens to the distant rumble of gunfire and explosions. He wakes to his valet Heinz Ling announcing, "On your marks." He learns that Mussolini has been executed, his body dragged through the streets. Beaten, spat on, and strung up, a fate Hitler fears awaits him too. Turning to Ling, he says, "You must never allow my corpse to fall into the hands of the Russians. They would make a spectacle in Moscow out of my body and put it in waxworks." Ling agrees, then hands him a round of medication, one of 28 he's currently taking, along with cocaine eye drops for a persistent condition. Making matters worse, SS Chief Heinrich Himmler has secretly attempted to negotiate a surrender behind Hitler's back. The end has clearly arrived, and both men know it. That same day, Hitler marries his longtime companion Eva Braun. They toast with champagne, though the marriage will be exceptionally short-lived. Day 2068 Hitler wakes around 11 a.m. and calls for his secretary, Traudl Jung. "Over tea," he asks. "Have you had a nice little rest, child?" She replies that she has. "Come along," he tells her. "I want to dictate something." In his final testament, he insists Germany bears no responsibility for the devastation of the war, claiming it was desired and provoked entirely by those international statesmen who were either of Jewish origin or worked in the Jewish interest. He goes further, declaring, "The responsibility of the outbreak of this war cannot rest on me," shifting blame instead onto British politicians and what he calls Jewish leadership. 4 men, Goebbels, Bormann, Bergdorf, and Krebs, witness and sign the document. Soon, all 4, like Hitler, will be dead. Before their own deaths, Goebbels and Bormann carry Hitler's body and Eva Braun's into the Chancellery Garden and set them ablaze, Soviet artillery audible in the distance. Not long after, American and British troops arrive in Berlin, though it's French forces, feeling entitled to some measure of retribution, who carry out much of the looting and killing that follows. In some homes, soldiers find entire families already dead, seated together in their living rooms. It's a scene that leads British officer David Fraser to write, "There is so much vile cruelty in the world for us to say that with any satisfaction that good has been victorious." Back in England, philosopher and pacifist Bertrand Russell, who nonetheless believed Hitler had to be stopped, reflects, "And all this madness, all this rage, all this flaming death of our civilization and our hopes, has been brought about because a set of official gentlemen, living luxurious lives, mostly stupid, and all without imagination or heart, have chosen that it should occur rather than that any one of them should suffer some infinitesimal rebuff to his country's pride." Now, you need to hear this amazing story, why Hitler's nephew was his worst enemy. Or check out what's coming next.